July 1944, Western Germany. Late afternoon light slants through broken cloud and turns the bomber stream into a moving metal river. At roughly 25,000 feet, the air is thin enough to sting the lungs through an oxygen mask, and cold enough to make exposed metal bite bare skin. Inside the American formation, engines beat a steady, synchronized thunder, 4 at a time, hundreds at once, a vibration you feel in the bones more than you hear. Beneath that bass note, there is the constant rattle of slipstream, the faint smell of oil and heated wiring, and the sharp metallic taste that comes when fear sits behind the tongue. Off to the side of the box, escort fighters weave, small and quick, searching for the next dark specks that mean interceptors. And then, without warning, something climbs up from below like it has been fired out of the earth. No gentle spiral, no measured approach, but a near-vertical surge. A brief, violent streak that crosses the sky too fast to count. It leaves a pale exhaust trail that looks wrong for an airplane, and in seconds it is already above the bombers, arcing over the formation as if gravity has lost its grip. There is no time for a clean call-out, no time for a long chase, barely time to register the shape before it is gone again, diving away in a blur. For the first time in this air war, men who have watched flak bursts and cannon shells and burning wings feel a different kind of unease. Because whatever just appeared does not seem to fight by the old rules, and the question is immediate and unavoidable. What happens when the sky itself starts launching weapons upward? By the summer of 1944, the strategic stakes over Germany are no longer abstract. The Western Allies are committing to the daylight destruction of the Reich's industrial heart, and the American doctrine is relentless. Mast-heavy bombers, tight formations, defensive fire, and a belief that production can be broken by systematic pressure. In the air, it has become a war of attrition measured in engines, aluminum, fuel, and crews. The United States can replace losses at a scale that shocks every enemy planner who ever counted factories and dismissed American will as soft. The 8th Air Force and 15th Air Force are pushing deep, day after day, putting hundreds, sometimes more than 1,000, B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators over targets that matter. The bombers are not alone anymore. Long-range escorts, especially P-51 Mustangs, are changing the geometry of survival. German fighters can still kill, still set bombers on fire, still carve up a box when the timing is right, but the cost has become ruinous. The Luftwaffe is being forced to fight not just a battle for airspace, but a battle for time. Time to train pilots, time to make fuel, time to keep the war economy breathing under the hammer blows. On paper, Germany's answer is technology and shock. In a nation squeezed by blockade and bombing, the leadership searches for wonder weapons to restore initiative. The rocket plane is the most literal expression of that desperation. A machine built not to dogfight, not to patrol, but to explode upward into the bomber stream with the speed of a projectile. The Messerschmitt Me 163 Komet is not a jet. It is something stranger, an interceptor powered by volatile propellants that can climb faster than anything in the sky, reach the bombers in minutes, and then glide home when its short, furious burn is spent. It is a weapon designed around a single idea: meet the bombers before escorts can matter, strike with the first pass, and vanish. If that idea works even a little, it could force the Americans to rethink daylight raids and give German industry breathing room. If it fails, it will still leave behind a different kind of wreckage, one that comes from trying to turn chemistry into air power. On the German side, expectation has been shaped by years of propaganda and by the technical culture of the Luftwaffe itself. The men who still fly in 1944, many of them young, many of them rushed, have been told that enemy air power is a machine to be outsmarted. They have been trained to believe in the sharp edge, the perfect climb, the perfect angle, the perfect shot. They have watched new variants arrive with heavier cannon, with rockets, with improved climb rates. They have seen the enemy adapt and bring more escorts, more radar, more mass. Now they are being offered something beyond adaptation, a rocket plane that promises to erase the enemy's advantage in numbers by rewriting the timing of interception. To the men briefing these missions, the Komet is portrayed as inevitability made metal, an aircraft that cannot be caught in the climb, cannot be matched in acceleration, a needle that will pierce the bomber box and then slip away before the escorts can respond. But expectation in the air is a fragile thing. It survives until the first time you watch the sky betray your assumptions. For many German pilots, the rocket plane's first appearance is not a triumphant parade of new power. It is an unsettling disruption of what they understand about flight. The Komet climbs like something unnatural, but it also lands like a wounded bird, skidding in on a retractable skid instead of wheels, vulnerable at the worst moment. It can strike with astonishing speed, but it has almost no endurance. Its fuel is so dangerous that the smell of it, sharp, chemical, wrong, becomes a warning in itself. The ground crews handling the propellants treat them like poison, because they are. The pilots know, in a way propaganda can't soften, that they are climbing into a machine that might kill them without the enemy ever firing a shot. Confidence turns to a more complicated emotion. The fear of the enemy, yes, but also the fear of your own weapon. And on the American side, expectation has its own shape. By 1944, American bomber crews have learned to anticipate German tactics. They know the slashing head-on passes, the attacks from 12 o'clock that exploit the bombers' weakest defensive coverage. They know the formations of BF-109s and FW-190s, the cannon bursts, the smoke trails of a wounded engine. They have learned to read the sky for flak concentrations and fighter rendezvous points. They have learned to trust the escort fighters overhead. The thought of a rocket-powered interceptor is almost too strange to hold in the mind at altitude, until the first time the formation sees it, until the first time a thin, pale exhaust trail climbs past them like a flare, and something moves so quickly that the gunners struggle to lead it at all. Routine becomes uncertainty. The familiar threat of fighters becomes something closer to a mystery, a weapon that arrives too fast to track and leaves too quickly to pursue. The Me-163's story in combat begins not with a single dramatic duel, but with the slow assembly of a desperate system. In 1944, the Luftwaffe establishes units specifically to operate this weapon, including Jagdgeschwader 400, the fighter wing most closely associated with the Komet. Its bases are chosen for proximity to expected bomber routes and for the ability to launch quickly. The Komet is tiny compared to the heavy bombers it is meant to kill, a compact fuselage with stubby wings, built to minimize drag and maximize climb. Its Walter rocket motor burns two separate propellants that are kept apart until they meet in the combustion chamber. The engineering is brilliant and terrifying. The fuels are hypergolic, meaning they ignite on contact. That removes the need for an ignition system, but it also means that leaks, spills, or combat damage can turn the aircraft into an instant inferno. The propellants are corrosive and lethal, and accidents on the ground are not rare. A pilot can survive flak and fighters and still be killed by the invisible chemistry that powers his own climb. When a Komet launches, it does not roll down a runway in the way other fighters do. It is usually fitted with a jettisonable dolly, wheels used only for takeoff. The rocket ignites and the aircraft surges forward, fast enough to feel like being shoved by a giant hand. The dolly drops away after liftoff, tumbling back to Earth. From there, the Komet climbs at rates that other pilots can only describe with disbelief. The point is to reach the bomber stream quickly before escorts can position for a protective screen. In theory, the Komet's speed and climb make it almost untouchable during ascent. In practice, that speed compresses everything: navigation, target acquisition, aiming. A pilot has minutes, sometimes less, to locate a formation that may be miles wide and layered in altitude. He must convert that climb into an attack geometry in a sky filled with contrails, flak bursts, and escort fighters searching for anything that moves. The first rehook beat comes not from enemy action, but from physics and fuel. The Komet's powered flight is brutally short. Depending on throttle settings and exact conditions, it can have only a handful of minutes, often described in the range of several minutes of rocket burn. After that, it becomes a glider. The same aircraft that was a missile on ascent becomes a silent, unpowered craft drifting through hostile airspace on the way down. The ticking clock is not metaphorical. It is measured in seconds of thrust. Every second spent searching is a second stolen from the attack. Every correction in the climb costs fuel. The pilot feels the urgency in the rising engine note and in the knowledge that when the roar stops, he will be falling through a sky dominated by the enemy. When the Komet does reach the bombers, the encounter is almost always violent and brief. It is not an aircraft designed to linger near the formation. It is designed to slash. Its closing speed can be extreme, and the pilot's window to fire can be a blink. The Komet's armament, typically heavy cannon for such a small aircraft, is meant to tear apart a bomber with a short burst. Some aircraft in the broader German intercepting arsenal employ rockets fired from conventional fighters. The Komet itself is the rocket. Its presence changes the psychology of the engagement. Bomber gunners are trained to track fighters that approach along predictable lines. The Komet's approach can appear from below and behind, or from below and ahead, arriving faster than the mind expects an airplane to move. The gunner swings his turret, squeezes, watches tracers arc, and often realizes he has led too little or too much because the target is already passed. German pilots who fly conventional fighters and witness the Komet in action describe a strange mixture of pride and disquiet. The Komet is proof that Germany can still innovate under pressure, but it is also a reminder of how far the Luftwaffe has been pushed. A force that once dominated Europe with disciplined formations and experienced leaders is now throwing rocket planes at bomber streams because it cannot afford time. The Komet's very existence is an admission that the war has become a contest of industrial endurance, and Germany is searching for shortcuts. For the Americans, the Komet's appearance becomes one more threat layered into an already lethal environment. Over the target, flak remains the greatest killer of bombers, dense, accurate, and increasingly coordinated. Fighters still attack in waves. Now there is also the possibility of a rocket interceptor making a single high-speed pass that can shatter an aircraft before the gunners even identify it. And yet the Americans adapt as they have adapted to everything else, by recording, analyzing, and countering. After action reports note unusual high-speed attackers. Escort pilots are briefed to watch for steep-climbing aircraft and to position to catch them when they are most vulnerable on the glide home. Because that vulnerability is the Komet's fatal flaw, and it is not a small one. Once the rocket burn ends, the Komet is no longer the fastest thing in the sky. It is a glider with limited ability to maneuver aggressively without bleeding altitude. It must return to a specific landing field because it lacks the flexibility to divert easily. It must descend through layers of enemy-controlled airspace, sometimes crossing paths with escort fighters that now have time to see it, time to chase it, time to force it lower. The Comet's pilots know that their most dangerous moment is not the climb. It is the return. The second rehook beat comes with a flip of advantage. The hunter becomes prey. P-51 pilots who have learned to anticipate the Comet's glide path begin stalking the landing pattern. They cannot easily catch a Comet in powered climb, but they can wait. They can follow at a distance, conserving fuel, watching the rocket plane descend, watching it commit to its approach. The Comet, landing on a skid, must come in fast. It cannot execute repeated go-arounds like a normal fighter. Its approach is a narrow corridor between too high and too low, too fast and too slow. On final, it is an aircraft with limited options, descending into a place the enemy can predict. In those moments, the Comet's technological wonder feels less like a sword and more like a trap. To understand why the Comet could inspire terror and yet fail to change the war, you have to feel both sides of its rhythm. The rocket ignition is a violent roar, the aircraft shoved into the sky. The cockpit vibrates. The pilot's vision narrows as acceleration pushes blood and breath into discipline. The world below falls away fast. The bomber stream, a few minutes earlier a distant rumor in the clouds, becomes a wall of aircraft and contrails. Then, as quickly as it began, the roar can cut. The engine note drops and the plane becomes quiet. In that quiet there is a different sound. The wind, the subtle whistle along the canopy, the creak of airframe under load. Silence is not relief. Silence means the clock has run out. Silence means the aircraft is now committed to gliding through a sky full of enemies. It is in that silence that the recurring symbolic object of this story first becomes more than background: the coffee. On American bases in England and Italy, coffee is everywhere, stove-blackened in mess tents, poured into tin cups, refilled without ceremony. The smell of it rides the air in briefing rooms and on cold flight lines. It is ordinary. It is constant. It is the scent of a machine that runs on schedules and supply chains. The crews drink it before they fly, and when they return, and sometimes when they do not return, the coffee still boils for the next crew. In the air, the coffee becomes a memory more than a taste, but it is anchored to something the Germans can sense from the outside: American abundance. The bomber stream itself is a kind of coffee smell made visible, mass-produced, repeated, relentless. Germany has no equivalent. By 1944, the Reich is rationed, strained, fighting shortages in fuel and mate. Reals that shape every decision. The Comet's rocket fuel is a cruel irony, a weapon that consumes rare, dangerous chemicals in minutes, built in a nation that cannot afford to waste minutes. Meanwhile, American crews climb into aircraft built in numbers the Germans cannot match, fueled by supplies that arrive across oceans protected by an industrial navy. Coffee is not a weapon, but it becomes a symbol of the deeper imbalance. The Germans can build a rocket plane. The Americans can build a war that makes rocket planes irrelevant through repetition. Still, in the cockpit of an American bomber, none of that industrial philosophy matters when a comet appears. What matters is the sudden motion at the edge of vision, the impossibly fast climb, the sense that something is wrong with the sky. Crews report seeing aircraft that seem to rocket upward, leaving trails unlike normal fighters. Some accounts describe the Comet's pass as so fast that gunners had trouble even identifying it as an airplane. In the confusion of combat, estimates vary. Some report it as a jet, others as a rocket, others as a new kind of missile. The psychological effect is real regardless. Uncertainty amplifies fear. A known threat can be managed. An unknown threat turns every contrail into a question. German command hopes that this fear will translate into operational effect. If the Americans believe a new weapon can slice through formations with impunity, perhaps raids will be reduced, routes shifted, altitudes changed. But the American Air Forces are not built to be spooked into retreat. They are built to absorb loss and continue, and by 1944 they have already paid in blood to prove it. Instead of pulling back, they study the threat. They adjust tactics. Escorts are told to watch for steep climbers, to look for unusual exhaust trails, to patrol near known Komet bases when possible. The Komet becomes one more problem to be solved with discipline. The third rehook beat arrives in the form of malfunction and self-destruction. The Komet is not merely dangerous in combat, it is dangerous as a routine. The propellants are unforgiving. Ground accidents occur. Landing accidents occur. A hard skid landing can rupture tanks or lines. In some cases, pilots are killed by explosions or chemical burns after surviving the air battle itself. The weapon designed to save Germany's pilots from the bomber stream becomes, in too many cases, a cause of death even before contact. This is the hidden cost of desperation technology. It demands perfection from human beings who are already exhausted, undertrained, and pressed by a collapsing war. When the Komet does score successes, they are often impressive in the narrow frame of a single engagement. A heavy bomber struck by cannon fire at high closing speed can disintegrate or burn quickly. But the number that matters is not the drama of individual kills. It is the ratio between effort and effect. Each Komet sortie requires special fuel, special handling, special training. Each sortie offers only a brief chance at contact. The Komet cannot loiter to protect a region. It cannot escort. It cannot patrol. It can only sprint, strike, and glide. Against a bomber offensive that arrives in masses and returns again tomorrow, such a weapon must achieve extraordinary results to matter strategically. By most documented estimates, the Komet's total combat impact remains limited compared to the scale of the Allied bombing campaign. Its reputation in the sky is larger than its tally on the ground. And yet reputation is not nothing. In war, fear can be a force multiplier. German pilots in conventional fighters, watching the bomber streams grow and their own fuel shrink, want to believe the Komet signals a turning point. American crews, hearing reports of rocket planes, feel the war becoming more strange, more mechanized, more absolute. The sky over Germany in 1944 and 1945 becomes a laboratory of extremes. Jets, rockets, guided weapons, and increasingly desperate tactics. The Komet is one sharp edge of that evolution, a glimpse of a future that arrives too late to save the present. As 1944 turns toward 1945, the strategic environment tightens further. The Luftwaffe is bleeding experienced pilots. Training pipelines are collapsing under fuel shortages. Airfields are bombed, relocated, improvised. The Komet units operate under increasing pressure, often with limited opportunities to intercept due to operational constraints and Allied control of the air. The Americans, meanwhile, push deeper and hit harder, not only against factories, but against the infrastructure of air defense itself. Airfields, fuel plants, transportation nodes. The bomber streams are no longer just raids. They are a sustained condition. The fourth rehook beat comes with weather, the oldest complication in flight and the one no wonder weapon can solve. The Komet's interception depends on timing and visibility. A bomber stream hidden behind cloud layers can slip through. A sudden shift in wind can alter glide paths and landing approaches. Icing, turbulence, and cloud can turn the Komet's already narrow margins into a lethal gamble. For the bomber crews, weather can be a shield or a trap. A cloud bank can conceal them from fighters, but it can also break formations and make mutual defense harder. In the gray, cold air over Germany, the war is often fought with partial information, the enemy glimpsed and lost in seconds. In that environment, the comet's appearance feels almost supernatural because it is so brief. A rocket plane can erupt from below the clouds, pierce into sunlight near the bombers, fire, and vanish back into gray. The escorts may see only the exhaust trail and the angle of climb. The gunners may see only a shape and a flash. The pilots in the bomber formation may not see it at all, only the result: an aircraft suddenly falling out of formation, a wing burning, a parachute blooming. But there is another side to the comet's presence. It reveals in painful clarity what Germany is forced to trade away. A conventional fighter is a tool of flexibility. It can be used in different roles. It can be redeployed. It can be repaired with standard parts. A rocket interceptor is a specialist weapon that demands a specialized ecosystem. That ecosystem is fragile under bombing. It depends on fuel production, chemical supply, trained crews, intact bases. The Allied air campaign does not have to shoot down every comet. It only has to disrupt the system enough that the comet cannot appear when needed. And still the comet appears. It appears because the German state keeps pushing men into machines that promise miracles, and because the pilots of JG-400 and related elements climb anyway, knowing the odds. In those pilots, the fear is layered. There is fear of the bomber stream's defensive fire. There is fear of the escorts waiting on the glide. There is fear of the landing skid, of coming in too hot and breaking apart. There is fear of fuel, of leaks, of flames, of invisible chemical death. Their courage is not clean. It is not cinematic in the heroic sense. It is the courage of men trapped in a collapsing system, asked to become part of a weapon that may outlive them. On the American side, the fear is different. It is the fear of being one aircraft in a mass, knowing that mass is your protection and your exposure. It is the fear of flak you cannot dodge, and fighters you can sometimes fight. The rocket plane adds a new note to that fear. The fear of speed, the fear that reaction time itself is being stolen. A comet attack can feel less like a duel and more like an accident waiting to happen, an impact at closing speeds that leave little room for skill to matter. For crews trained to believe in gunnery and formation discipline, this is unsettling. It suggests a future where survival is decided by who can build faster machines, not who can aim better. The fifth rehook beat arrives as a delayed revelation. The most shocking number in the comet's story is not how many bombers it destroys, but how many of its own pilots and aircraft are lost to accidents and operational hazards. In many accounts and unit histories, the comet's non-combat losses are a grim shadow over its combat record. It is a reminder that technological extremity can punish the side that deploys it, especially when deployed under duress. The fear the comet inspires in its enemies is real, but the fear it imposes on its own operators may be deeper, because it is inescapable. This is where the coffee returns, not as a comfort, but as a contrast. On an American base, coffee means routine. It means you have fuel for training flights and test runs. It means you can afford to fly to practice, to build muscle memory in the air. It means your ground crew has the parts to fix what breaks. It means the next mission is already on the schedule, regardless of how the last one went. In Germany, by late 1944, routine is collapsing. Fuel is scarce. Training is abbreviated. Spare parts are cannibalized from wrecks. Airfields are cratered and repaired and cratered again. In that environment, a weapon like the Komet is both a statement of ingenuity and an indictment of scarcity. It is a blade forged when there is not enough steel. As the war approaches its final months, the Komet's operational window narrows further. Allied fighters roam deeper with near impunity. The ground war closes in. Bases are threatened. The Luftwaffe's ability to coordinate interceptions declines. The rocket plane remains spectacular in isolated moments, but spectacle cannot change a strategic tide powered by factories and fuel depots. The Americans keep coming. The bomber streams continue. The smell of coffee in the morning on an English airfield remains stubbornly ordinary, because the war machine behind it is ordinary in its scale, built to make the extraordinary routine. Yet, even in its limited effect, the Komet changes percept. It teaches the Americans that Germany will push technology to extremes, and that the air war is evolving faster than any peacetime doctrine could have predicted. It reinforces the importance of escorts, of intelligence, of attacking the enemy's infrastructure rather than merely his aircraft. It shows that a revolutionary weapon can be neutralized by targeting its support system and exploiting its vulnerabilities. And it teaches a quieter lesson about democratic resilience, not a slogan, but an observed fact that the enemy can see in the sky. The Americans can absorb surprise and respond with system. For the Germans, the lesson is harsher. The Komet teaches that innovation cannot compensate for strategic collapse when the enemy has already achieved industrial momentum. It teaches that weapons built around brief, spectacular moments must still live inside a sustainable doctrine, and Germany in 1944 and 1945 has no sustainability left. The Komet also teaches that fear is not enough. You can terrify an enemy in a single pass and still lose the war if you cannot repeat the pass at scale. In the final phase, the Komet becomes almost symbolic of the Reich's last posture: fast, desperate, brilliant, and doomed. A rocket plane that can climb like a miracle but cannot stay. A weapon that can reach the bomber stream but cannot hold the sky. A machine that demands perfect conditions in a war that has become nothing but broken conditions. And in the background, always, there is the soundscape of industrial air war: engines, flak, radios, and the distant hum of production. The recurring object, the coffee, returns again in the aftermath when crews debrief and the war rolls forward. In American debriefing rooms, men speak in clipped terms about flak concentrations, fighter sightings, unusual attackers. They mark positions on maps. They translate fear into data because data can be acted upon. Coffee sits in tin cups, refilled, cooling, reheated, refilled again. The smell clings to jackets and gloves. It is a small comfort, but it is also a sign of continuity. A war run by schedules and supply lines, by people who can do the same brutal job again tomorrow, because the system behind them will not collapse overnight. In Germany, by contrast, the continuity is breaking. Airmen move between bases under pressure. Fuel allocations shrink. The Komet's special propellants become harder to produce and transport under bombing. The dream of a wonder weapon collides with the fact that even wonders need delivery trucks, intact rail lines, trained mechanics, and unbombed factories. The sky does not care about propaganda. It cares about logistics. When the war ends, the Komet remains as an artifact of that collision. It is studied. It is remembered. It becomes part of the lineage of post-war rocketry and aviation, a glimpse of what the rocket age might look like in the air. But its combat story is inseparable from the conditions that birthed it: a collapsing defense system trying to invent time. The Komet could climb faster than anything on Earth, but it could not climb out of strategic reality. And that is the larger truth that settles over the last images of this story. In the high, cold air over Germany, the rocket plane appears like a scream, brief, sharp, unforgettable. It terrifies because it arrives too fast to understand. It vanishes too fast to punish. For a moment, it makes men look at the sky differently. But the war is not won by moments alone. It is won by the ability to make tomorrow come again and again. With fuel in the tanks, parts in the crates, pilots trained enough to survive, and missions planned enough to continue. In the end, the bomber streams keep crossing the same altitudes, the same rivers, the same industrial cities. The escorts keep weaving. The flak keeps bursting. The rocket plane's exhaust trail fades into the larger haze of contrails that mark the last years of total war. And on distant airfields, in tents and hangars and drafty briefing rooms, the coffee keeps boiling, an ordinary smell in an extraordinary time, a quiet proof of abundance, repetition, and the kind of resilience that does not need to look miraculous to be decisive. The final shot is not the rocket's flame. It is the steady, unglamorous rhythm behind the flame. The cup refilled, the engines warmed, the next mission rolling, and the sky learning one day at a time which system can endure.